Hi, my name is Nathan. You're watching Nice at Dice, and today I'm taking a look at Marvel United. Marvel United is a cooperative game for one or more players in which you take on the roles of Marvel superheroes. You're trying to defeat a supervillain. It mainly revolves around managing a hand of cards, playing those cards. Each of those cards has icons that lets you take different actions, and you get to use both the icons on the card you just played and the icons on the card that the last player played. So you get to build one turn off of another. I have the base Marvel game. I also have the X-Men edition of the game, and I have the Into the Spider-Verse expansion. So I'm going to be sort of reviewing all of this content all together today. I'm going to show you real quick how the game works, and then we'll come back up here and I'll give you my thoughts on it. So the center of a game of Marvel United is these 6 location tiles that are arranged in sort of a circle here. And on one of those locations, you're going to put all of the hero figures. In this particular game, I've got set up with Black Widow, Iron Man, and Captain America. And then on the opposite tile, you're going to have the villain's figure. This time we're going up against Red Skull. Characters are going to be moving around the table, right, from one location to another. Each location has a few features, which I will try to show you here. First of all, at the top, you have sort of these outlined squares where you can be placing either these civilian tokens, or on the opposite side, you have thugs. So you're going to have civilians and thugs in the location. There's a definite limit to how many you can have, and if at any point you would add more than there's room for, you're going to have overflow, and overflow is going to cause something bad to happen. Each location also has an end of turn effect. So if a hero ends their turn on this location, they get to do this effect. However, at the beginning of most games, all of those location end of turn effects are going to be covered over by these crisis cards. Crisis cards are a part of the villain and what makes the villain unique, and they can do a number of different things. This is a card that does something bad every time the villain lands on this spot, but there are also crisis cards like this Madam Hydra, who's a henchman, and she'll basically be attacking heroes who stop on her space. She has these hit point tokens. Once you eliminate all her hit point tokens, then you've defeated her. In the case of this crisis card, it has these 3 star spots. These are for heroic action tokens, which look like this. If you put 3 heroic action tokens on here, then you clear that crisis. So clearing crises is one of the 3 objectives that you will do in the game. The other 2 objectives would be rescuing civilians or defeating the thugs. But this is kind of the center of the game here. You have the heroes on these tiles and the villain on the tile, and you're moving around locations. You're rescuing civilians. You're defeating thugs, you're dealing with the threat cards, and eventually you're going to be attacking the villain himself. Now, let's talk about the villain in a little more detail. He has this dashboard over here, which includes this card. First of all, you're going to put a number of hit point tokens on here, depending on the number of players, and the ultimate goal of the game is to defeat the villain by eliminating all of his hit point tokens. You're also going to have a BAM effect. So the villain has a deck of cards here. Some of these cards, not that one, but this one, for example, says BAM on it. So whenever you see that BAM, you're going to resolve his BAM effect, which usually involves dealing some damage to heroes on his location. May involve some other things. Then you also have an overflow effect, and that's what I was talking about, where each location has a limited number of spaces where it can hold civilians or thugs, and if you would ever need to add more to the location than it can hold, it's going to trigger the villain's overflow effect. In the case of Red Skull, the BAM effect and the overflow effect involve moving this tracker, moving this cube up this track. This is called his fear track. He's trying to generate fear. And if this ever gets to 20, then the villain will win the game and the players will lose. So you're trying to take him out, eliminate all his hit points before he gets this up to the end of the track. All right. Also over here, you have these 3 cards. These are your mission cards. And this one involves rescuing 9 civilians. So as you rescue civilians from locations, you're going to put them on this, filling in these 9 spots. When you filled in all 9, you will have completed this mission and you'll remove it from the dashboard. This mission right here is defeating 9 thugs, works exactly the same way. And this one is clearing 4 threats. So again, the threats are these threat cards, 1 on each location. Once you've cleared 4 of them, you've cleared this objective. After you've cleared one of these missions, it doesn't matter which order you clear them in, but after you've cleared one of them, the villain is going to become hyperactive. He's going to start taking his turn more often. After you've cleared 2 of them, then you can now damage the villain directly by attacking him while you're on the same space as him. And if you manage to clear all 3 of these objectives, then you get a little boost. Everybody draws a card, but it's not essential to beating the game. So the important thing is clearing at least 2 of these objectives and getting rid of all of the villain's hit points. Now, what you're going to be doing on your turn, each player has a deck of cards, a small deck of cards that represents their character. They're going to start out with 3 cards in hand. On the beginning of their turn, they're going to draw a card, and then they're going to look at these cards and they're going to choose one to play. So all of the cards have symbols on the bottom of the cards. And let me see if I can find just an example. Here we go. We'll swap out these 2. All right, so you have this, which is a wild symbol. It can be any other symbol you want it to be. You have this, which is a move symbol. So for each move symbol, you can move your character 1 space in either direction around the circle. All right. This is an attack symbol. You can use this to either take out 1 thug on your location. You can just take out the thug, or you can deal damage to a henchman who have their own hit point tokens. Or once you've cleared 2 of these objectives, you can deal damage to the villain if you're on the same space with the villain. That's what this symbol does. And then you have this yellow star. This is a heroic action. You can use the heroic actions to make progress towards clearing these threats that have the heroic action markers there. Or you can use the heroic actions to rescue the civilians and put them towards the objective or just get them off the board, right? Those are basically your options. Some cards are also going to have special abilities, like this one for Black Widow, Interrogate. Look at the top card of the Master Plan deck. You may play it on the You may place it on the bottom of the deck, right? So you could look at the top card. You can either let that be his next card, or you can move it to the bottom, whatever. Each hero has different special abilities that kind of reflect the type of character that they are. So you're going to choose one of these cards to play. Let's say for our first turn, we're going to play this card. So she can move and she can use a heroic action. So she's right down here. Maybe she'll move over to this location and she'll use a heroic action to rescue this civilian. All right, so that makes some progress towards there. It also frees up space here because we don't want overflow, right? So that's good. Then the next player, let's say Captain America, he's going to have his 4 cards. And he's going to choose a card to play. And for every turn after the first player turn, you get the added advantage that when when you play your card, you're going to get whatever symbols are on your card, plus you're going to get the symbols on the last hero card to be played. Right? So Cap's automatically going to get a move and a heroic action. And so, for example, let's say he could play this card, which will give him 2 heroic actions. So now he's going to have 3 heroic actions and a move. He could use those 3 heroic actions to clear this threat. We'll get rid of that. We'll move this little threat token here over to there to mark that we have cleared a threat towards accomplishing this objective. And then his movement, maybe we'll just move Cap over here so he can deal with some stuff over here on his next turn, right? So we'll do that. Iron Man would then take a turn, and after every 3 player turns, the villain will flip over a card and resolve his card. So like this one tells us the villain moves 3 spaces clockwise. So 1, 2, 3. He'll stop there on Avengers Tower. And then he's going to add some more civilians to his location, plus 1 each to the locations adjacent to his location, clockwise and counterclockwise. All right, so that's what is going to happen there. Like I said, after you resolve any one of these missions, the villain will speed up, so he will start taking a turn after every 2 hero turns instead of 3. And so that escalates things. Basically, you're just, like I said, you're moving around, you're trying to deal with these crisis cards, you're trying to keep, civilians and thugs out of the location so you don't have overflow. Working towards accomplishing 2 or 3 of these objectives so that you can start damaging the villain, and once you have removed all of his hit point tokens, you win the game. And then again, every villain has a victory condition for them. In the case of Red Skull, it's getting his little cube up to the end of his fear track, in which case all the players will lose the game. But that can vary from one villain to the next. That's a general overview of how Marvel United plays. Now let's go back up top and I'll tell you what I think of it. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea of how Marvel United works. Again, I shouldn't say I'm reviewing the entire system because there are a lot of expansions, a lot of material for this game, but I am kind of encompassing both the base game, the X-Men edition, and the Spider-Man expansion all in this one review, all right? So first of all, a couple of things super obvious about this game that might tell you right away whether this is a game for you or not. First of all, it's Marvel. If you don't like Marvel, not a game for you. It has this very stylized, chibi type of art. If that is not your speed, again, not a good game for you. It is also either cooperative or solo. There's no competition in this game, so that'll tell you maybe whether this is a good game for you. But if none of that stuff has turned you off from the game, the next thing that I want to know about a game like this, especially one with a big, IP attachment to it like Marvel, is whether or not the game really captures the feel of that intellectual property. So there's a few places in this game where its theme, the Marvel universe comes through. One is with those location tiles. For the most part, it's just a piece of art with a number of spaces on it for those civilians or thugs. But it also has that end of turn action that you can take if you end your turn there and you've dealt with whatever threat was there. Those are not super thematic, but there are a few of them that, they do feel kind of thematic to what the location is supposed to be. So that's kind of cool, but it's nothing that's going to blow you away. Then you have the heroes. Each hero has their own deck of cards. Most of the cards in that deck just have one or two symbols on them. Some of them have a special ability. And here, there's a bit of theme that comes through. Like, for example, in the little overview I gave you, you saw one of Black Widow's special abilities that lets her look at the top card of the villain deck and either leave it there or move it to the bottom. That kind of fits with the whole idea of Black Widow as a super spy type of character who can know what her villains are up to and maybe manipulate them. So that's pretty cool. And then again, with other characters, their personality comes through a little bit in those special abilities. Now, I will say, I'm coming to this game from another game called Marvel Legendary, which is a huge Marvel game with lots of expansions. It's a deck building game. In that game, each hero has a set of cards, and each card has special abilities on it. And the kind of the character, the personality, the theme of each character really comes through strong in that game. So coming from that to this game, I feel like the characters do not feel as distinct, as unique and individual as I would like them to. But there is still some variation between the characters, right? So there's still some of that theme coming through in the characters. Where the theme really shines through the most in this game is with the villains. Each villain has their little dashboard. They have their deck of cards that determine their actions. They have also the threat cards that you put out on the board in the beginning, and then they might also have one or two additional rules that change things up. That is where the game is really interesting and where the kind of the theme of the game comes through. I showed you a little bit of how Red Skull works, and Red Skull is like the most generic, most basic villain. But when you start to get into some of the other villains in the game, for example, the X-Men version of the game has Mystique as one of the villains. Mystique has you put a token on the board that represents Senator Kelly, and Mystique is basically on a mission to assassinate Senator Kelly. So now you have this extra character on the board who's neither a hero or a villain, but the hero players can kind of manipulate, move him around the board, and Mystique on her turn is always going to be trying to chase down Senator Kelly and take him out. So that's, very thematic. The Spider-Man expansion has Green Goblin, and Green Goblin has a thing where he has the threat cards like all the others, but his threat cards don't start on the board. Instead, you don't have any threat cards, on the board at the beginning, and they come out over the course of the game. And if he ever gets a threat card in all 6 locations, then he wins. And to me, that just really captured kind of Goblin's whole shtick about, giving the hero 2 impossible choices. Like, you can't save both of these people, so who's it going to be? Kind of things. It's like he's just putting out too many problems all over the board. And when it gets to be so many that the heroes can't possibly save everybody, then that's when Goblin wins. And there's just other things like that, with the different villains that capture sort of the style and flavor of that villain really well. Now, I will say that the most interesting thing about repeat plays of this is playing against those different villains and trying to figure out what strategies you need to use to beat each of the villains. Now, I'm going to kind of segue into a little comment here about cooperative or solo games in general and my experience with them. I really like cooperative and solo games, but I find that they tend to fall into sort of like one of 2 categories. You have games like, for example, Pandemic or Hot Shots. Great games. Each play of the game basically presents you with just a small variation on the same puzzle. And with those types of games, I tend to have the experience that I enjoy them, but after I've beat them, after I've won the game a few times, I kind of lose excitement for the game. I feel like I've experienced what the game has to offer, and that's it. I don't really need to play it again. There are a couple exceptions. I have a couple of games like that I keep around, and I'll break out and I'll play them now and then. But for the most part, when it comes to solo or cooperative games that are just every game's just a slight variation on the same puzzle, I can play them maybe half a dozen times, and then I've kind of seen what's there to see, and I'm done with them. Then you have other cooperative or solo games where the gameplay can change dramatically with each setup, and there's a constant flow of expansions that bring new material to the game so that you can continue to experience new stuff every time you play the game. I mentioned Marvel Legendary. That is one of those. It has a ton of material, and they're always coming out with new villains, new heroes, just new material for the game, so I can continue to play it and feel like I'm getting a fresh experience every time. Marvel United is a game that has a lot of material, right? I already have the 2 base boxes and 1 expansion, and that gives me a good selection of heroes and villains. And there are a lot more expansions out there. The problem that I have with it is that basically all that expansion material is unavailable unless you backed the Kickstarter for this game that, happened a year or 2 ago. You can buy some of it, secondhand, but the price markup is so extreme that it just doesn't appeal to me at all. It's not a realistic proposition for me to chase down any of those expansions and add them to my collection. So for me personally, I've played everything here, and I enjoyed all of it. But having played against and beaten every villain in these 3 boxes, I feel like I've hit that point where I've experienced what the game has to offer. I could break it out for people if somebody wanted to play it. I could break it out and play it with them, and I'd still enjoy the experience overall, but it just doesn't have me excited to come back and play more. And that is with having played, again, both of the 2 base boxes and the 1 expansion I was able to get, right? So even with all this material, I've still, after maybe about 15 games of it, I've hit that point where I've kind of lost that excitement to come back and play it some more. Now, that being said, I don't think, I was able to get a good deal on all of this, right? I didn't spend a lot of money on it. And I think even if you spent, the standard retail price for these 3 boxes, I think you'd still get a reasonable amount of entertainment out of it for, the dollar spent. So that's not really, anything negative about the game. But just be aware that this is the sort of game that if you don't get all the material, then you will eventually hit a point where you've played against and beat every villain. And at that point, it can kind of feel like you've seen everything the game has to offer. So this isn't going to be an evergreen game for me, and maybe not for you either if you have similar tendencies that I do when it comes to solo or cooperative games. But it is a fun game. It's pretty simple, right? It's not overly complex, but those different villains really change things up from one game to the next. That is really cool to work with and to see what kinds of strategies you need to beat each villain. And there is some variation between the heroes too that keeps things interesting, but really the stars of this game are in the villains and the variation that comes there. Again, I hope that was informative to you, to help you decide if this is a game for you. My name is Nathan. You're watching Nice at Dice. Thank you so much for watching, and you enjoy the rest of your day.